Number 13. Again, I want to thank you all for your faithful following of this Crebilly Farm 2 hearing. I'm Carol DeWolf, Chair of the Board of Supervisors. To my left, we have Scott Yaw in the middle. He is the Vice Chair. We have the Police Commissioner to my left here, Dick Pomerantz. And down there, John Altschul is our Township Manager, and our solicitor is Pat McKenna. So this evening we will be hearing a little bit from our applicant, and then we will turn it over for public comment from the parties, followed by anyone. And I'm going to pass over the rest of the message to Pat McKenna for this evening.
Thank you, Carol. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me say it's nice to see you all in person for this process for the first time in close to 2 years. So tonight is a little awkward in that we don't exactly have the microphones set up in the way that we had asked, so we ask that you please be a little patient with us. We will be handing 2 microphones down for public comments so that you can be heard. We have a couple of housekeeping matters for tonight. At the last hearing, via Zoom, there was a Zoom outage shortly after our break. A number of the members of the public, it appeared, were not able to get back into the hearing to participate. In light of that fact, the applicant has brought their traffic engineer, Nicole Kline, back. I have the list of everyone who asked questions and who did not, so we're going to go through that list with the parties. If you have questions of Ms. Kline, then you will have the opportunity to ask those questions. If you asked questions at the last hearing, you don't get another bite of the apple tonight. She's been brought back specifically for those who did not have the opportunity to do so. After she is done, that will conclude the evidentiary period of the hearing this evening. We will discuss the moving of all of the exhibits into the evidence, and then following that process, we will have public comment. I anticipate there will be at least 2 microphones. We'll ask people to alternate with your comment. Similar to Crebilly 1, we're going to allot about 4 minutes, somewhere in that area. So I will let you know when you have reached about that time period and ask that you be respectful of your time and of those who are here that wish to be heard. We only have the room until 10 o'clock, so we don't anticipate going past that. I expect we will take a break at 8:30 as we typically do. I have one board exhibit that I need to mark for this evening, and that is an email from David Berger. David and Iris Berger were parties to this proceeding. They emailed me on June 28th and asked that they be removed as a party from the hearing as they no longer live in the township. So I have marked that email as Exhibit B76. So with that in mind, I'd like to move to Ms. Kline, who has a microphone. If for some reason you can't hear us, please let us know. I'm pretty loud, so you won't have that issue. Ms. Kline, I'll remind you that you're still under oath from the last time that you testified. And I'm going to go through my list, so bear with me as I have to hold the microphone at the same time. If the parties are here, please just let me know if you have a question. If you don't have a question, please just let me know that you're here. We'll have the microphone from Carol down front. I'm going to ask, perhaps Maggie can grab that for anybody who has a question. So looking at my list, Ms. Labram, I think maybe you were cut off. Did you have any questions for this witness?
Hi, Nicole.
Good evening.
Mr. Madden testified at the last hearing concerning road widening of 3 to 4 feet on the Crebilly side of New Street, 100 feet north and 100 feet south of the bridge on New Street in order to obtain a 14-foot wide cartway. on the Crebilly side. Can you describe these proposed road improvements on New Street as well as their purpose?
So the purpose is that the township ordinance requires a 14-foot half-width cartway to conform with the road width requirements based on the classification of New Street. So it is a requirement of the township, and that is why the widening is proposed.
And how wide will the bridge be when the road widening is completed?
So the extension that is proposed would allow for the road widening to be 14 feet as required. Specifically, how far does it need to be extended? That's not a question I can answer.
You testified in response to a question from Supervisor Pomerantz that the 926 and Collector Road intersection, you're not up against traffic capacity thresholds. So there is still significant capacity available to maintain operations should the traffic realized in the future be higher than what has existed to this point. May I ask about the intersection of 926 and New Street, where you have suggested that dedicated left turn lanes in both directions on 926 will not be installed despite the warrants. What's going to happen to the levels of service at that intersection where horses, bikers, and bicyclists all cross heading up New Street with all the added traffic using the Collector Road as an alternative to Route 202 being directed to that intersection?
So we're going to pull up the exhibit, the traffic impact study, so that I can quote some of those details for you. A46B is what I'm going to refer to, which is the traffic impact study, and I'll pull up the levels of service. So in our study, we look at the weekday AM and weekday PM peak hours, which I've testified to many times. So at the intersection of 926 and New Street, we have evaluated that intersection in without and with development conditions as required based on PennDOT criteria. And PennDOT has mitigation criteria. If we are changing the overall level of service, i.e. dropping the level of service, degrading it, we can do so up to 10 seconds of increased delay. So when we look at our results in both the AM and PM peak hours, based on that criteria, there are no mitigation improvements required based on the added traffic of the development. So there is no requirement based on PennDOT rules to install any improvements at that intersection. The applicant is committed to providing a dedicated westbound 926 right turn lane, which can be done within property they control. So that is an added improvement that is not required per the PennDOT rules.
Your study takes into consideration all the traffic generated by the community which you're building. Does it take into consideration the traffic which is presumed to be using the Collector Road as an alternative to US 202?
Yes, it does.
Are you aware that the HOA of Brandywine at Thornbury has voted, and the Board of Supervisors of Thornbury Township have agreed, to make the intersection of Broderickwood Boulevard and 926 a right-in and right-out intersection only, to block through traffic from the Collector Road at the intersection of 926? Have you accounted for the closure in your traffic estimates for that intersection at 926 and New Street?
So I'm aware, we have been involved in conversations with the township. I'm not aware of any official votes, but I am aware that they had raised that potential at meetings that we all attended at PennDOT's offices. And as PennDOT stated in those meetings, if they choose to limit movements at that intersection, that is their prerogative, and it does not change the findings in our study.
So you don't believe it'll have any impact on the number of vehicles which will go right on 926 coming off of the Collector Road?
It will result in no change in the recommendations and findings in our study. Will it have some minor changes in the detailed calculations? Yes, but not to any significance that would change our findings or recommendations.
Would you agree that a roundabout, either a single lane or a mini, at the intersection of New Street and Route 926 would provide a safer alternative for vehicles, horses, and pedestrians at the intersection rather than a stop-controlled intersection?
So we have not done any detailed evaluation of a roundabout at 926 and New Street, but with my knowledge and background in roundabout design, I do not believe a single lane roundabout would accommodate the traffic that exists at that intersection. So the capacity would not be there, and so it would not be an appropriate feature at that intersection if that is the case.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Labor. So again, moving through the list of those who did not have the opportunity to ask questions at the last hearing. Is Mr. Bevilacqua here or anyone for the school district or West Glen HOA? Mr. Spackman, I believe you have some questions for Thornbury Farm Trust.
Hi, thank you. How are you doing?
Good evening, Mr. Spackman.
Everybody looks so lifelike tonight. It's amazing. I love it. So, Nicole, thank you very much. Some of my questions are with Thornbury Township. If they do close the Bridlewood Boulevard and make that a right in, right out, would the connector road traffic that would come, because I'm trying to understand that the theory behind the connector road, if there's not a through connection to bypass the 926-202 interchange, because the connector road would bring people down over 926 through Bridlewood down to southbound back on the 202. If that need no longer exists, that would accommodate maybe just through traffic of the development. But if the traffic can't go south, it would go perhaps west on 926 and then left on South New Street to further go down to 202. Or what's your thought process, I guess, on what if they close that road, where that traffic would lead to head west?
Sure. So a primary purpose of the collector road is serving the movements along 202 to and from 926. So not that additional traffic that would continue south on 202, for example. Now, if the Bridlewood Boulevard intersection of 926 remains full movement, we did evaluate in our study based on travel times. Southbound 202 in the afternoon, it would take less time for that traffic to continue south if it did use the collector road and use the Bridlewood Boulevard roadway. If that is not an option, that traffic will stay on 202. That is its second shortest route in terms of travel time. So the collector road then would really serve development traffic as well as those heavy movements between 926 and 202 to and from the west.
Okay, do you think...
Mr. Spackman?
Yes.
I'm sorry, can I just ask you to get a little closer to the microphone, speak up a little bit? It's hard for us to hear up on the stage.
Yes,
Thank you.
Patrick. So with the collector road taking perhaps some movement off of 926 or so, my concern is for the traffic that's headed west. Is there a computation for what would be turning left on the South New Street or an added increased service through the 926 New Street crossroads?
So I am again going to refer to our study, which is Exhibit A46B, just to confirm the details. Based on the travel time analysis, which I just described, we are not anticipating traffic utilizing the collector road that then would ultimately turn left to travel south on New Street as a matter of existing traffic changing its route. Just as a matter of the way traffic negotiates through the roadway network, may some development traffic make that movement? Yes, it may, which would be a small number of vehicles, which would be accounted for in our study. But we are not, based on our travel time analysis, there is no justification for traffic that is diverting from 202, for example, to ultimately use South New Street as an alternative.
Okay, thank you. Would the increased service or needs for the 926 South New Street crossroads, we currently have bicyclists and trails and things like that in place currently from the town. Is there any design plans for promoting or maintaining the level of service that we have now for bicyclists and walkers and joggers that we have at crossroads?
So there's no level of service criteria or requirements for bicyclists and pedestrians. We are not removing any facilities that exist at that intersection. So we would not be incorporating anything that would be to the detriment of bicyclists or pedestrians.
And the improvements that Toll will be doing to that intersection will be on the Crebilly property. Could you explain what would be happening on that side of the road, please?
Yes. What they have committed to is to provide a dedicated right turn lane along westbound 926 to travel north on New Street. And that would be completed within the right-of-way and property that would become right-of-way from the Crebilly trail.
And that would be the only turning lane changes to that intersection?
Correct.
Would the timing of the light need to be changed, or are there intervals that help with the level of service?
We did, in cooperation with PennDOT, look at optimizing signal timings at that intersection. So that would be a part of the improvements by the applicant as well, within the parameters that PennDOT requires.
Would a crosswalk or pedestrian light access button be allowed at that intersection for when we want to cross the road to be able to hit it to be able to get the change, because there is not a all red cycle right now on that?
So I'm going to refer to our study A46B again, just to confirm what exists at the intersection today. Give me just a moment to get to that information. So I'm just referring in our Appendix B, we have the existing traffic signal permit plans within our study. So based on the existing plan, there are no dedicated pedestrian facilities at the intersection today. And there would not be facilities in the future that would facilitate a crossing. So at this point, there is not a proposal to add any specific pedestrian crossings at this location, since the facilities don't exist.
Even though the facilities don't exist at this time, would it be a permanent improvement with the trail network that the county's putting in place with Battlefield connections?
So currently there's actually no pedestrian crossing indications at this intersection. So if facilities were to be added, that would be the appropriate time to reinvestigate how the signal operations and equipment needs to change to match up with that.
Okay, thank you. And one last question. With the widening for a westbound turn lane on the Crebilly side of the property, how wide is one of those turn lanes? What is the pavement? Is that like a 18-foot, 16-foot paved width? I'm just curious what the extra surface area would be.
Sure, we'd be talking about a maximum of a 14-foot wide turn lane.
Okay. The reason I ask is when we do bring horses and tractors across the intersection, another 14 feet to navigate is sometimes exciting now on 926, much less 14 more feet.
Yep, understood.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spackman. Is there anyone here for Brandywine and Thornbury HOA with a question? Okay. Radley Run 3 HOA, is there anyone here this evening? Arborview HOA, is there anyone here this evening for a question? Westtown Village LP, anyone here tonight? Robert Dahl. Mr. Dahl, if you're here, do you have any questions? Mr. Memakari, I don't know if you're here. Do you have any questions if you are? None? Thank you. Philip or Susan Jones, if you're here, do you have any questions? Deanna Larars, if you're here, do you have any questions? David or Catherine Prize, if you're here. Do you have any questions, sir? Denny or Patty McFadden, if you're here. William Worth, I know is not here. I have a public comment for him to be read later. Bob Williman, if you're here, sir. Victor or Carly Malatesta. Karen Grime, if you're here. Steve Ernie. Eve Herrick. Are you here? Yes, ma'am. Do you have any questions? No questions at this time? Fenton Mejia. Thank you, ma'am. Nicholas Bonkowski. Dr. Cecilia Wright or William Vosper. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I hope this is the right spot. It's a traffic question. I know that you have a lane where 202 South runs into the bypass. It's a one-lane exit. And I believe you had PennDOT approval to make that 2 lanes. Is that correct or am I wrong there?
I'm sorry, can you repeat which lane you were talking about?
Where 202 South enters the Westchester bypass with 202 North on a one-lane exit. Right after Stetson.
So that's outside of our study area. That is not a part of this application or being evaluated.
I thought that's what I thought at one time you said PennDOT had approved they were going to widen that intersection to that exit to 2 lanes. But that's not part of yours.
That is not.
Okay. And the next part of the question will be to the board of supervisors, and I guess I'd do that in public comment.
If you have a comment, yes. So it's not really, depends on what the question is, but right now questions are just from Ms. Kline.
This will be questions for you then, I guess. But also for you, I know PennDOT has a checkered history, decades old, of having their proposals funded by the legislature. If that one-lane exit doesn't get funded and built, it's going to create an additional traffic jam.
I'm sorry, it's going to create
additional traffic jam. I'm sorry for that. So I don't know where to put that in, but I'll do it in comment probably.
That's fine. Public comment's probably for the best.
Okay, thank you.
David Teal, if you're here, and Patrick McKenna. No questions, sir? Thank you. All right, so that was everyone who did not have an opportunity at the last hearing. Okay. I'm sorry, ma'am, did you have a question? Okay. Greg, did you have any redirect?
No, I did not.
Does the board have any questions based on what you've heard? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Kline.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Carol does have a question.
I'm having a difficult time hearing, but as I understand, you said Bridalwood has confirmed they only allow right in and right out now from Bridalwood?
If this project is approved, they will change the intersection of Briarwood and 926 to be a right out lane, which will stop the bypass traffic coming through the collector road using Briarwood Boulevard to go further south.
And excuse me if somebody has asked this question, but to you, given that those numbers of the southbound on Bridalwood would change with that impact, both to 202 and to South New Street, what is your response, given that your numbers for those two, if that in fact happened, would not be representative at this time?
So we did demonstrate within our traffic study that even without any diversion that would use Bridalwood, if that through movement was available, the development would still meet the PennDOT rules and does not require any additional mitigation improvements. So we did demonstrate that within the study.
Would you not agree that you would have increased traffic to both of those directions, both east and west on 926?
We would, in that some assumed diversion would not be able to utilize that Bridalwood connection, but because we knew that that could be a question, we demonstrated that even without that diversion assumption, the increase in traffic is still within the thresholds of PennDOT's criteria that additional mitigation improvements would not be required in that condition beyond what the applicant has already committed to.
What about the stacking at that intersection?
Stacking included, talking about level of service and queues.
That's all, thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Adelman, I think at this point we've concluded the evidentiary portion and we ought to move to admission of exhibits. Looking at my list for the board exhibits relative to Crebilly 1, I have exhibits B36 through and including tonight's exhibit is B76. And unless there's some objection, I'd like to admit the board's exhibits.
No objections other than any of those which I may have previously stated on the record.
As to toll, I believe we have exhibits A41 through and including A94, which have been presented at Crebilly 2. Is that correct?
That's correct. I've moved for their admission, and I believe we've already incorporated from the prior record exhibits A1 through A40 as well.
Correct. Is there any objection to the admission of the applicant's exhibits A41 through A94? All right, no objection, then will be admitted. Moving on to the Planning Commission's exhibits, specific only as to Crebilly 2's proceedings, we have PC Exhibit 21 through and including Exhibit 28. Is that correct, Ms. Camp? And that you would move for the admission of those exhibits? Any objection to the admission of those exhibits?
No additional objections other than those previously stated on the record.
Yes, Mr. Crawford.
I believe that the Planning Commission's summary recommendations from July 14th, 2020 isn't marked as an exhibit. At least when I saw it, I didn't believe it was.
I believe it's part of the board's exhibits.
It is a board
It's a
exhibit.
board exhibit, okay. Thank you. I thought that should be. Okay, thank you.
So the Planning Commission's exhibits 21 through 28 will be admitted. Thornbury Township, in Crebilly 1 only had the exhibit T1. In Crebilly 2, we have exhibit T1A through 6. Mr. Laverton, do you move for the admission of those exhibits? Any objection?
No objections other than those that I previously stated.
All right, they will be admitted. And then finally, we had exhibits which were in the form of videos at the last hearing from Carol Weller. They were marked Weller Exhibit 1 through and including Weller Exhibit 4. Ma'am, I presume you would like those exhibits admitted, is that right? Any objection to the admission of those exhibits?
No additional objections other than those that I previously stated on the record.
All right, those will be admitted as well. Does anyone believe I've missed any of the exhibits? That was the list that I had. Council, anything?
Nothing further from me.
Okay. Moving on, I think at this point, we're going to move to public comment. For those who were arriving a little bit late, we're going to have 2 microphones down here for you. Maggie Dobbs is going to help get the microphones to the parties, actually to anyone that's here, excuse me. We're not going to go in any particular order, so please feel free when you're ready to come up. We're going to permit approximately 4 minutes, so I'll let you know about when you get to that point. I have been asked by Mr. Worth to read his quick public statement, so I'm going to do that first. I will note that you are still on the record, so please try to speak slowly and loudly so that the court reporter can hear you, and we will take a break at about 8:30 to give the court reporter a break. This is a statement dated July 4th to the Board of Supervisors from William Worth. My many years of growing up and continuing life in the neighborhood of Crebilly Farm makes me saddened to fear the housing development of such a sacred piece of open land. Chester County and all its townships must protect the remaining pastures and woods that remain. And with the Crebilly Farm's many acres and the Revolutionary War connection, the farm seems especially important to save for future generations. I am sure you members have pursued funding for the establishment of a historic park or a conservation easement plan to conserve the farm. Conservation easement funding could possibly come from the county or state, as it has in the past. The Robinsons could accept 25% of their asking price and then sell the farm to a buyer for 75%. With the permanent prevention of ever developing the land. I still hold hope that something can be done, and I am sure you all hope for the same thing. With my gratitude, William Worth. I do have the statement in case you need it. So with that, why don't we go ahead and move to our public comment, please.
Jack Simpson, 1111 Meeting House Road.
Sir, I need you to get real close to that microphone and speak out, please.
Jack Simpson, 1111 Meeting House Road. How's that? Is that good?
Even louder. If you can't hear me, I'm loud.
Jack Simpson, 1111 Meeting House Road. I don't think I've missed a meeting, and I've heard so much negative comments about the community, how it's going to negatively affect the community. I'm curious as if you have one good thing to say that's going to benefit the community.
Thank you, sir. So please come on up if you have comments. We have microphones at both aisles.
Anthony Sinkovich, 821 Kimberly Lane, just up the road from Crebilly. To the Board of Supervisors, first of all, I would like to thank the Westtown Township Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors for the opportunity to provide input. This has been a professionally executed process and an insightful education on how local government works. I learned a lot by listening. Also, a special shout out and thank you to Mila Robinson and Maggie Dobbs for their fine work on managing those Zoom calls. Let me begin. Just a piece of land. 5 words uttered by Mr. Madden, the Toll Brothers project manager, in response to a question from Supervisor Pomerantz about what he saw when he first encountered the Crebilly property. Just a piece of land. That seems to describe this development plan. This is more critical than DEP studies and preservation issues. In the business world, we would call this majoring in the minors. My comments and recommendations here are majoring in the minors. My comments and recommendations, I'm going to sit down a second. My comments and recommendations here are an attempt to get us out of the weeds and focus on the big picture. Constitution says we the people. This development project comes down to I versus we. Individual interests versus community interests. The last time I looked, Westtown Township was a we. 11,000 plus people qualifies as a we. There was a concept in community planning called resident equity that seems to be missing in this process. This may be a legal process, but it is incomplete. My perception is that this conditional use requirements process has a low bar and is murky at best. All you need to do is satisfy minimalist requirements and you get approval. And that is what our township got, a minimalist plan. Crebilly 2 is very similar to Crebilly 1, seemingly a copy-over effort. Where is the value added in this second proposal? Where is the expanded upgraded plan? How is this plan making our township better? We have yet to hear anything like this from Toll Brothers because, again, it's just a piece of land. As far as I know, Toll Brothers never reached out to the community to develop a consensus plan. They never were a partner with the community, somewhat of an adversary. They did not look into nor address a number of community concerns. Comprehensive EPA evaluations, branding, land battlefield input, Lenape Indian encampments in the area, runoffs into the Quarry Swim Club, unique horticultural and serpentine